Long before the first cities rose and the earliest scribes etched symbols into clay, humanity was already solving problems with breathtaking creativity. Picture a world without the wheel, without writing, without the organized farms we take for granted, yet somehow our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were thriving, crafting ingenious solutions that vanished into the fog of time. These aren't just relics gathering dust in a museum. These are the forgotten innovations that quietly built civilization itself, laying the groundwork for everything that followed. Some were so ahead of their time, it's as if they were whispered into existence by minds we'll never fully understand. Others were so simple yet so revolutionary, they changed the course of human history only to be erased by the passage of millennia. What if I told you that some of the most pivotal inventions in human history aren't in your textbooks, that the tools, techniques, and ideas that shaped entire societies have slipped through the cracks of memory? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 30 of these lost marvels, artifacts of genius that predate recorded history itself. Think of the earliest known adhesive, crafted from birch bark tar over 200,000 years ago, holding stone tools together long before glue was a household item. Or consider the mysterious potter's wheel of ancient Mesopotamia, a device so transformative it reshaped how humans stored food, traded goods, and even worshipped their gods. These weren't accidents, they were deliberate leaps of imagination, born from necessity and honed by generations of trial and error. So why did these breakthroughs fade from our collective memory? Some were overshadowed by flashier successes, like the way woven fabrics replaced animal hides and vanished the intricate tanning methods of Ice Age hunters. Others were so seamlessly woven into daily life that they became invisible, like the lunar calendars carved into bone by prehistoric astronomers' calendars that still influence how we track time today. But here's the most thrilling part. Every one of these innovations whispers a story about who we are. They prove that curiosity and ingenuity aren't modern traits. They're etched into our DNA as ancient as the first spark of fire. So let's journey together into the deepest corners of prehistory, where the echoes of these forgotten breakthroughs still ripple through our lives. By the time we're done, you'll never look at a simple tool or tradition the same way again, because behind each one lies a secret chapter of human brilliance waiting to be rediscovered. Buried beneath the waves for 2,000 years, the Antikythera Mechanism emerged from a shipwreck not as a corroded relic, but as a time capsule of genius. Imagine a device no larger than a shoebox, its bronze gears interlocking with such precision that it could track the movement of planets, predict lunar eclipses, and even forecast the dates of ancient Olympic Games. This wasn't just a tool, it was a masterpiece of engineering, a celestial calculator crafted centuries before the first mechanical clocks appeared in medieval Europe. The sheer complexity of its design with differential gears previously thought to have been invented in the 16th century forces us to ask, how did ancient Greek engineers achieve what the rest of humanity wouldn't replicate for over a millennium? What's even more astonishing is the context of its creation. This device wasn't born in a vacuum. It hints at a lost tradition of scientific craftsmanship, a school of thought where astronomy, mathematics, and metalworking converged. Scholars now believe it might have been the work of followers of Archimedes, the legendary inventor whose treatises on gears and mechanics were said to be so advanced they were nearly incomprehensible to his contemporaries. Yet the Antikythera Mechanism wasn't some one-off marvel. Fragments of similar devices have been referenced in ancient texts, suggesting these celestial computers might have been more common than we ever realized. So why did this technology vanish for over 1,000 years? The answer lies in the fragility of knowledge itself. As wars, fires, and the slow erosion of time consumed libraries like Alexandria, entire disciplines of ancient science slipped into obscurity. The Antikythera Mechanism survived only by accident, preserved in the silent depths of the Mediterranean while the world above forgot its very existence. Today, it stands as a humbling reminder not just of how much we've rediscovered, but of how much brilliance might still be waiting beneath the sands or the sea, or hidden in plain sight. High on a windswept plateau in southeastern Turkey, a cluster of towering stone pillars stands silent guard over a mystery that rewrites human history. Göbekli Tepe, built around 11,500 years ago, predates Stonehenge by 6 millennia, and yet its sophistication would be staggering even in a much younger civilization. Picture 20-ton limestone monoliths, some taller than a giraffe, hauled from quarries miles away without the aid of wheels or domesticated animals. Each one is etched with elaborate reliefs of scorpions, foxes, and vultures, their details so crisp they could have been carved yesterday. This wasn't just a gathering place. It was a cathedral of the Stone Age, erected by hunter-gatherers at a time when experts long believed humans were too preoccupied with survival to dream in stone. The implications are earth-shaking. For decades, historians clung to a simple narrative. First came agriculture, then permanent settlements, and finally monumental architecture as a byproduct of surplus labor. But Göbekli Tepe flips that script entirely. Here, the temple came first, a project so vast it would have required hundreds of workers, fed and coordinated for generations. How did nomadic bands, supposedly living hand-to-mouth, achieve this? The answer might lie in the very carvings that adorn the pillars. Those animals aren't just decorations. They're a Rosetta Stone of symbolism, hinting at a shared belief system powerful enough to unite scattered tribes. Imagine the pull of a sacred site so compelling that people willingly abandoned their nomadic ways to build it, planting the seeds of permanent community in the process. What's even more remarkable is what archaeologists didn't find. There's no evidence of dwellings, no grain stores, no signs of a ruling class. This suggests something radical, that cooperation, not coercion, drove humanity's first great construction project. Unlike the pyramids built by pharaohs with whips and quotas, Göbekli Tepe feels like a collective act of devotion. And when you trace the timeline, a tantalizing pattern emerges. Shortly after its completion, the region saw the world's earliest domesticated wheat. Could it be that the temple didn't follow agriculture, but actually inspired it? That the need to feed gatherings of worshippers spurred the first experiments in farming? If so, then civilization didn't arise from bread alone. It was born from awe. Today, the site's true purpose remains shrouded in the same mists that cling to its hilltop at dawn. But one thing is certain: Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider the very definition of progress. Maybe advanced culture wasn't the end result of survival. Maybe it was the spark that made survival meaningful. Those towering pillars aren't just relics. They're a message in stone, reminding us that human ambition has always reached farther than our tools, and that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't gadgets or gears, but the ideas that bring us together. While Europe's medieval cities were dumping waste into open streets, a civilization on the other side of the world had already cracked the code to urban cleanliness 4,000 years ago. The Indus Valley cities, like Mohenjo-Daro, weren't just settlements. They were marvels of civil engineering, with a sanitation system so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the height of the Roman Empire. Picture this: every house connected to a network of brick-lined drains, each one carefully sloped to carry wastewater away from homes and into covered sewers beneath the streets. Some residences even had indoor toilets with terracotta pipes funneling waste directly into the city's underground system. This wasn't luxury, it was a public health revolution, born from an understanding of hygiene that wouldn't resurface in the West for centuries. What's truly remarkable is how egalitarian this innovation was. Unlike Rome's aqueducts, which served the elite first, the Indus system reached nearly every corner of society. Even modest homes had access to clean water from wells and waste disposal, suggesting a collective commitment to health that transcended class. Archaeologists have found evidence of street-side garbage bins and a city-wide drainage grid that could handle monsoon rains, features that would make modern urban planners nod in admiration. But here's the mystery: when the Indus Valley civilization declined, their sanitation wisdom vanished with it. Europe would spend the next 3,000 years grappling with plagues spawned by filth, while the memory of these ancient sewers faded into dust. The reasons for this forgetting are as layered as the cities themselves. Some scholars point to climate change drying up the region's rivers, forcing populations to scatter and abandon their urban innovations. Others suggest that the very success of the system made it invisible. When clean water and waste removal are expected, no one thinks to write them down. But the lesson here isn't just about pipes and bricks. It's about how easily progress can unravel when knowledge isn't preserved. Today, as modern megacities struggle with pollution and water scarcity, the Indus Valley's legacy offers a quiet challenge. Civilization isn't just about grand monuments or conquests. Sometimes the most profound innovations are the ones that keep people healthy, hidden beneath their feet, flowing silently toward a better future. In the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the world's first cities took root, an unassuming tool quietly revolutionized human survival. The Mesopotamian seed drill, a wooden implement so simple it could be mistaken for a child's toy, held the power to transform barren soil into fields of plenty. Picture a hollow tube attached to a plow, dropping seeds into perfectly spaced furrows at regular intervals, no wasteful scattering by hand, no clumps of choked seedlings fighting for sunlight. This was precision agriculture born 6,000 years before the Industrial Age, a breakthrough that turned farming from guesswork into a science. What's staggering isn't just the invention itself, but the ripple effects it unleashed. Before the seed drill, planting was a chaotic affair, handfuls of grain tossed across tilled earth, with seeds either clumped together or scattered too thinly to thrive. The drill changed everything. By ensuring each seed had room to grow, it doubled or even tripled crop yields overnight. Suddenly, a single farmer could feed far more people, freeing others to become potters, scribes, or builders. This surplus didn't just fill stomachs, it built the very foundation of urban life. The great ziggurats of Ur, the bustling markets of Babylon, even the first written tax records on clay tablets, none would have been possible without the quiet efficiency of that wooden seed dropper. Yet the most fascinating question isn't how it worked, but how they figured it out. Without microscopes to study germination or textbooks on plant spacing, Sumerian farmers must have noticed patterns over generations. That evenly spaced seeds grew stronger, that depth mattered as much as distance. Their solution wasn't high-tech by our standards, but it was genius in its simplicity. Modern experiments recreating their methods reveal something astonishing. These ancient drills achieved planting accuracy within a few centimeters of today's mechanized seeders. That's not just luck, it's the result of meticulous observation honed over centuries. And then, like so many innovations, it vanished from memory. When Rome fell and Europe slid into the Dark Ages, the seed drill became a forgotten relic. It wouldn't reappear until the 18th century when English inventors proudly rediscovered what Mesopotamians had known all along. This cycle of loss and rediscovery hints at a deeper truth that progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes the most transformative ideas fade away, waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. The seed drill's legacy reminds us that civilization doesn't advance through flashy inventions alone, but through countless small improvements, each one planting the seeds for the next. Deep in the pits surrounding China's first emperor, an army of clay soldiers stood frozen in time, each one unique, yet their weapons told a different story. Among the 8,000 terracotta warriors guarding Qin Shi Huang's tomb, archaeologists made a startling discovery: bronze crossbow triggers, arrowheads, and sword fittings so precisely crafted that parts from one weapon could fit seamlessly onto another. This wasn't just skilled metalwork, it was standardization on an industrial scale, achieved 2,200 years before Henry Ford's assembly lines. The genius lay in the details. Craftsmen working for the Qin Dynasty used molds and templates to produce identical components down to the millimeter. A trigger mechanism forged in one workshop would function perfectly in a crossbow assembled miles away, a concept so advanced Europe wouldn't adopt it until the 18th century's military reforms. But here's what's truly fascinating. This precision wasn't reserved for elite units. Even the rank-and-file infantry's weapons followed the same exacting standards, suggesting an entire supply chain built around interchangeable parts. Imagine the logistical brilliance required to coordinate foundries across a kingdom the size of Europe, all producing components that fit together like puzzle pieces. What's often overlooked is how this innovation transformed more than just warfare. Standardization seeped into everyday life under the Qin. Cart axles had uniform widths so ruts in roads would match every wagon. Farmers used identical measures for grain, while bureaucrats issued coins with consistent weights practices that greased the wheels of trade and taxation. This wasn't merely about efficiency, it was a philosophical revolution. For the first time, a civilization embraced the radical idea that uniformity could be a strength, that chaos wasn't inevitable. Yet, like so many breakthroughs, this one slipped through history's cracks. When the Qin Dynasty collapsed, much of its administrative knowledge dissolved into legend. The secret to their mass production, buried with the emperor's craftsmen. Modern engineers examining these artifacts still marvel at their tolerances, some components matched to within a fraction of a millimeter. How did they achieve such accuracy without precision instruments? The answer might lie in the Qin's obsession with control. Just as they standardized writing scripts and weights, they may have created master templates in bronze, physical prototypes against which every new part was checked. The real mystery isn't how they did it, but why the technique vanished for centuries. Some blame the Qin's brutal reputation. Later dynasties may have rejected their methods along with their legacy. Others point to the collapse of centralized workshops, scattering craftsmen who took their secrets to the grave. Whatever the reason, the loss speaks to a recurring theme: progress isn't permanent. The terracotta army's weapons stand as silent witnesses to an industrial revolution that bloomed too early, a reminder that even the most brilliant systems can crumble if knowledge isn't shared. Today, as we take interchangeable parts for granted in everything from cars to smartphones, these ancient bronze triggers challenge our assumptions about where innovation begins and how easily it can fade away. Pantheon's dome still towers over Rome after nearly 2,000 years, its concrete perfectly intact despite earthquakes, wars, and the relentless passage of time. Meanwhile, modern bridges and parking garages crumble after just decades. The difference lies in a recipe lost to history: Roman concrete. an engineering marvel that didn't just resist decay but actually grew stronger with age. At its heart was an ingredient so simple it seems absurd: volcanic ash from the region around Mount Vesuvius. When mixed with lime and seawater, this ash created a chemical reaction that formed rare minerals within the concrete. These tiny crystals acted like microscopic healers, filling cracks as they appeared with new binding material. Imagine a structure that patches its own wounds every time it rains. That's the genius Roman builders harnessed. What's astonishing isn't just the material's durability, but how widespread its use was. From the colossal harbor walls at Caesarea that withstood Mediterranean storms for centuries, to the underwater piers still visible along the Bay of Naples, this concrete defied every environment. Modern scientists analyzing samples made a jaw-dropping discovery: salt water, which corrodes modern concrete, was actually the secret to Roman concrete's longevity. The seawater triggered a continuous chemical process where aluminum tobamorite crystals formed, creating a structure that became denser over time. This wasn't just good engineering, it was chemistry perfected through generations of observation. So why did such an advanced formula vanish after Rome's fall? The answer lies in the collapse of empire-wide trade networks. The specific volcanic ash needed came from only a few deposits near Pozzuoli, and as shipping routes disintegrated, builders lost access to this crucial ingredient. Medieval masons, unaware of the complex chemistry, substituted whatever local materials they could find, with disastrous results. But here's the twist: the knowledge might not have been entirely lost. Some scholars point to Byzantine architects who maintained aspects of the technique, and even Venetian builders who used similar additives in their lagoon foundations. The real tragedy is that no one systematically preserved the full formula, turning what should have been a cornerstone of architectural progress into a fragmented mystery. Today, as engineers race to recreate self-healing concrete for nuclear waste storage and seawalls, the ancient Roman method offers unexpected inspiration. Laboratories have successfully mimicked the volcanic ash reaction, but with a sobering realization: our ancestors achieved this without electron microscopes or chemical assays. Theirs was a science of patience and observation, where builders passed down secrets through apprenticeships rather than textbooks. The Pantheon stands not just as a monument to Roman ingenuity, but as a silent challenge from the past. Sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't new inventions, but forgotten wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. In the bone-dry plains of southern Peru, where rain might not fall for years, the Nazca people didn't just survive, they thrived, turning one of Earth's most hostile landscapes into a cradle of civilization. Their secret, a network of spiral-staired wells called puquios, snaking deep into the desert floor to tap hidden rivers beneath the sand. These weren't mere holes in the ground. They were feats of hydrological engineering so precise, they still baffle scientists today. Picture this: stone-lined tunnels radiating outward like spokes from a wheel, each one graded at a near impossible angle to channel groundwater without erosion or collapse. Some stretched for miles, connecting dozens of spiral wells that acted like natural pumps: cool, clean water rising to the surface through nothing but gravity and geometry. The real mystery isn't just how they built them, but how they knew where to dig. Without satellites or drilling equipment, the Nazca mapped underground aquifers with uncanny accuracy. Some researchers believe they tracked subtle cracks in the desert surface where moisture escaped, or followed the flight paths of birds to hidden oases. Others point to the puquio's alignment with sacred mountains, suggesting spiritual knowledge intertwined with practical hydrology. What's undeniable is the result. These systems delivered water so reliably that some remain in use today, 2,000 years after their construction. Spanish colonists encountering them in the 16th century assumed they were the work of demons. How else could a primitive people master such wizardry? But the puquio's brilliance goes beyond their construction. They reveal a profound understanding of sustainability. Unlike modern wells that drain aquifers dry, the Nazca designed their system to replenish itself. The spiral shape of the wells cooled incoming air, creating condensation that dripped back into the groundwater. Stone filters purified the water as it flowed, while the tunnel's gentle slope prevented destructive turbulence. This wasn't extraction, it was collaboration with the desert itself. Yet for all their sophistication, the puquios nearly vanished from history. The Nazca left no written records, and Spanish chroniclers dismissed them as pagan oddities. It wasn't until the 1930s that archaeologists realized these spirals weren't decorative. They were the heartbeat of a civilization. Today, as modern Peru battles water scarcity, engineers are studying the puquios for solutions. Their lesson is timeless. Innovation isn't always about conquering nature. Sometimes it's about listening to it. Far from land under brooding Arctic skies, Viking ships didn't just drift blindly. They harnessed sunlight invisible to the naked eye. The legendary Sunstone, mentioned in medieval sagas as a magic crystal that revealed the sun's position through clouds, wasn't fantasy. Modern experiments confirm that certain transparent calcite crystals, when rotated toward overcast skies, polarize light in a way that pinpoints the sun's hidden location. Picture a Norse navigator holding up a chunk of Icelandic spar, watching as twin sunbeams merge into one bright spot. The true solar position revealed through optical physics the Vikings couldn't explain but mastered through observation. This wasn't just clever mineralogy, it was the difference between life and death on the open ocean. While other cultures hugged coastlines or waited for clear weather, Viking explorers could strike westward across the Atlantic with confidence, even in fog that would have left their competitors helpless. Archaeologists studying a shipwreck off the Channel Islands found a calcite crystal beside navigation tools, tantalizing evidence that sunstones weren't just poetic legend but working instruments. The precision is staggering. Tests show these crystals can locate the sun's position within 5 degrees of accuracy, rivaling early magnetic compasses without ever touching iron. What's often overlooked is how this technology reflects the Norse worldview. Unlike Mediterranean sailors who relied on stars and landmarks, Vikings embraced challenges others avoided: overcast seas, midnight sun, polar darkness. Their solution wasn't to avoid bad weather but to develop tools that rendered it irrelevant. Recent computer simulations of transatlantic crossings reveal something astonishing. Using sunstones just 3 times a day, Viking ships could maintain course accuracy within 100 miles after 2 weeks at sea. That's not luck, it's the result of generations refining techniques we're only now beginning to decode. Yet the sunstone's brilliance also highlights how fragile knowledge can be. By the time European explorers began crossing the Atlantic in earnest, magnetic compasses had replaced these crystals, and the technique faded into myth. Modern science only rediscovered the principle in the 1960s, when researchers studying light polarization stumbled upon descriptions in Old Norse texts. Today, as pilots and sailors study these crystals for backup navigation systems, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable truth: that ancient peoples may have possessed sophisticated technologies we dismissed as impossible. The Sunstone's legacy isn't just about wayfinding. It's a reminder that progress sometimes means looking backward to solutions that were elegant precisely because they worked with nature rather than against it. High on the ceiling of Dendra's temple, a sprawling map of the heavens glows with golden stars not randomly placed, but arranged with mathematical precision to track time itself. These weren't just decorations for the gods, Egyptian star clocks carved into temple walls and coffin lids as early as 2100 BC turned entire buildings into celestial observatories. Imagine priests tracing the movement of Sirius across the night sky, its rising marking the annual Nile flood with uncanny reliability. The constellations weren't just myths here, they were the gears of a cosmic clockwork, their positions dictating when to plant, when to harvest, even when to hold sacred festivals. What's often overlooked is how these star clocks doubled as both scientific instruments and spiritual guides. Each decan, a group of 36 stars used to divide the night into hours, was associated with specific deities, weaving astronomy and religion into a seamless whole. The temple at Dendera takes this further. Its famous zodiac isn't just a star chart but a three-dimensional calendar. The ceiling's curvature mirrors the actual night sky, with columns positioned to cast shadows that align with critical dates like solstices. Modern researchers using 3D modeling have discovered something astonishing. The temple's orientation captures the exact angle of Earth's axis shift over millennia, meaning these structures weren't just recording time. They were accounting for its slow dance across centuries, but the real genius lies in the practicality beneath the grandeur. Farmers didn't need complex charts. They had the heliacal rising of Sirius, a phenomenon where the star briefly appears just before dawn after months of invisibility. This single event, predictable to the day, signaled the Nile's life-giving floods would arrive within weeks. No bureaucracy, no confusion, just celestial mechanics translated into agricultural certainty. Even the humble merkit, a forked stick with a hanging plumb bob used to align stars, reveals their sophistication. Archaeologists replicating these devices found they could determine true north with accuracy rivaling modern compasses, proving that precision doesn't always require high technology. Why then did this system fade? The answer lies in its very success. As Egypt's empire waned and foreign powers introduced sundials and water clocks, the painstaking star observations became relics of a priestly class. Yet fragments survived in unexpected places. The 12 signs of the zodiac we still use today trace directly back to Egyptian decans, repurposed by Greek astronomers. The deeper lesson here isn't about lost technology. It's about how civilizations encode vital knowledge in their architecture, their rituals, even their stories. When we look up at Dendera's ceiling, we're not just seeing ancient astronomy. We're seeing a blueprint for how to live in harmony with the universe's rhythms, a wisdom as urgent now as it was 4,000 years ago. High atop the cliffs of Knossos, where the Aegean sun warmed whitewashed courtyards, the Minoans enjoyed a comfort that would vanish from Europe for over 3,000 years: flush toilets. Not crude pits or chamber pots, but sophisticated ceramic seats connected to terracotta pipes that whisked waste away with gravity and running water. Picture a palace where rainwater collected on rooftops filled overhead reservoirs, then flowed through channels that could be diverted to bathrooms with a simple wooden plug. This wasn't just plumbing, it was hydraulic engineering on par with anything the Romans would later achieve, yet it flourished 1,000 years before Rome's founding. What makes these Bronze Age bathrooms truly remarkable is how seamlessly they integrated into daily life. Archaeologists found entire sanitation networks serving not just royal quarters but workshops and guest rooms, suggesting cleanliness wasn't a luxury but a cultural priority. The system's elegance lies in its simplicity. Terracotta pipes with carefully calculated slopes prevented clogs, while vertical shafts vented odors upward. Some toilets even had removable wooden seats, a touch of comfort that wouldn't reappear until Victorian times. But here's the real shocker. Recent excavations revealed the Minoans had separate drainage for greywater and sewage, a distinction modern cities didn't adopt until the 19th century. So why did this brilliance fade into obscurity? The answer lies in the very disaster that doomed the Minoans, the cataclysmic eruption of Thera around 1600 BC. Tsunamis crippled their fleet, ash blotted out the sun for years, and the delicate web of trade that sustained their civilization unraveled. Later Mycenaean occupiers, though they reused the palaces, either didn't understand the plumbing or rejected it as unnecessary. Without centralized maintenance, pipes clogged with debris, and the knowledge to repair them dissipated like morning mist. The deeper tragedy is how close this technology came to surviving. Minoan-style plumbing appears briefly in later Greek legends. The palace of King Minos' labyrinth might have been inspired by Knossos' twisting pipes. Yet by classical Athens' golden age, even philosophers relieving themselves in chamber pots had forgotten that their ancestors once mastered water's flow. Today, as we take modern sanitation for granted, the Minoan toilets whisper a sobering truth. Civilization's comforts are fragile. They depend not just on invention, but on the threads of knowledge that keep those innovations alive across generations. In the year 132, when most of the world still blamed earthquakes on angry gods or mythical beasts shaking the earth, a Chinese polymath named Zhang Heng unveiled something extraordinary: a bronze vessel adorned with 8 dragon heads, each clutching a metal ball above the open mouths of 8 corresponding toads. This wasn't ceremonial art. It was the world's first seismoscope, a device so sensitive it could detect quakes hundreds of miles away, without a single modern sensor. Imagine the shock when, one day, a ball clattered from a dragon's jaws into a toad's mouth, signaling a tremor in a distant province days before messengers arrived with news of the devastation. The genius of Zhang Heng's design lay in its elegant simplicity. Inside that ornate bronze vessel hung a carefully balanced pendulum. When seismic waves rippled through the ground, the pendulum would sway toward the quake's epicenter, triggering a series of levers that released only the dragon's ball facing that direction. Modern recreations suggest it may have used a system of weighted arms or even liquid mercury to amplify subtle vibrations, techniques that wouldn't reappear in seismology until the 19th century. But here's what's truly remarkable. Records from the Han Dynasty claim the device once detected an earthquake 400 miles away that no one at court had felt. Skeptics dismissed it as luck until confirmation arrived weeks later. What's often overlooked is how this invention reflects a radical shift in thinking. Before Zhang Heng, earthquakes were seen as supernatural omens. His seismoscope reframed them as measurable phenomena, laying groundwork for the scientific study of tectonics. The precision of its directional indicators hints at an understanding of seismic wave propagation that seems impossible without modern instruments. Some scholars believe Zhang Heng may have observed patterns in how tremors rattled household objects or disturbed water surfaces, deducing that vibrations traveled differently depending on their origin. Yet, like so many breakthroughs, the seismoscope's secrets vanished with its creator. The original was lost to time, and later Chinese inventors struggled to replicate its accuracy. European seismographs of the 1800s, often credited as pioneers, were actually rediscovering principles Zhang Heng had mastered 17 centuries earlier. The few surviving descriptions leave tantalizing gaps. Did the device use resonance chambers to filter out ambient vibrations? Were the dragon heads purely decorative, or did their placement enhance sensitivity? Today, as scientists deploy networks of digital sensors to monitor fault lines, Zhang Heng's bronze masterpiece stands as a humbling reminder. True innovation doesn't always require complexity. Sometimes it's about seeing the world differently, recognizing that even the Earth's whispers can be measured if we build the right listener. The seismoscope's legacy isn't just in the balls it dropped, but in the paradigm it shattered, that nature's mysteries yield not to superstition, but to careful observation and craftsmanship. Beneath the scorching deserts of ancient Persia, an invisible network of waterways turned barren landscapes into flourishing oases, all without a single drop lost to the sun. The Kanat system, a labyrinth of gently sloping underground tunnels, didn't just deliver water. It defied the very logic of arid environments, harnessing gravity to channel snowmelt from distant mountains to fields and cities hundreds of miles away. Picture this: vertical shafts dug at intervals like stitches across the desert surface, not just for construction access but to create natural airflow that cooled the water as it traveled. This wasn't irrigation, it was hydrological alchemy, transforming evaporation's tyranny into a sustainable lifeline. What's astonishing isn't just the scale. Some qanats stretched over 30 miles, but the precision of their engineering. Persian surveyors, using nothing more than weighted strings and sighting rods, calculated gradients as shallow as 1 foot per mile to maintain a steady flow without erosion. The tunnels snaked beneath the desert like subterranean rivers, their walls lined with porous ceramic to filter impurities while allowing the earth to regulate temperature. Modern studies reveal how brilliantly this design worked. Water emerging from qanats in midsummer could be 20 degrees cooler than surface sources, a natural refrigeration system that preserved crops and communities alike. Yet the qanat's true genius lay in its democratization of water. Unlike the grand aqueducts of Rome that centralized control, qanats were community projects. Villagers maintained their local sections through a system of shared labor and water rights etched onto clay tablets, some of history's earliest legal codes governing resource distribution. This collaborative spirit birthed unexpected innovations. Some tunnels included underground milling chambers where flowing water turned grindstones, while others fed into ornate ice houses that stored winter chill for summer use. So why didn't this miracle of sustainability spread globally? The answer lies in the very thing that made qanats successful. They required intimate knowledge of local geology and generations of collective upkeep. When Arab traders carried the technology to Spain and North Africa, it thrived where similar arid conditions persisted. But in rain-rich Europe or monsoonal Asia, the labor-intensive system couldn't compete with simpler surface wells. The qanat's decline came not from failure, but from specialization. It solved desert problems too perfectly to adapt elsewhere. Today, as satellite imagery reveals thousands of forgotten qanats beneath Iran's deserts, modern engineers are rediscovering their wisdom. Solar-powered pumps now revive ancient tunnels to combat drought, while architects study their passive cooling for energy-efficient buildings. The lesson here isn't just about water. It's about designing with nature rather than against it, a philosophy as vital now as it was 3,000 years ago. The qanats whisper a truth we're only beginning to relearn. Sometimes the most advanced solutions are the ones that work in silence, hidden just beneath our feet. High in the Andes, where the thin air makes paper crumble and ink freeze, the Inca Empire built an administration spanning thousands of miles without a single written word, at least not as we know it. Instead, they wielded quippers, bundles of intricately knotted strings that somehow recorded everything from tax rolls to epic poems. Picture a bureaucrat's desk not stacked with scrolls, but hung with hundreds of these colorful cords, each knot's position, size, and sequence conveying precise information across generations. To Spanish conquistadors, they were mere curiosities. To modern scholars, they're one of history's most tantalizing puzzles, a three-dimensional writing system that may hold the key to understanding a civilization's entire memory. What makes quippers extraordinary isn't just their complexity, but their versatility. archaeologists have catalogued over 600 surviving examples, no two exactly alike. Some use simple numeric knots, a decimal system where placement along the string indicates units, tens, or hundreds, perfect for tracking warehouse stocks or census data. Others explode into fractal-like branches of subsidiary chords, their wool dyed in precise color sequences that hint at symbolic meaning. The most elaborate specimens, like those found at the sacred site of Pachacamac, contain knots so densely packed they resemble beadwork, suggesting narratives far richer than accounting. Recent breakthroughs reveal these may encode not just quantities but syllables, names, even philosophical concepts, a tangible language waiting to be deciphered. The real mystery lies in how such a system functioned without a Rosetta Stone. Unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, Quipus left no bilingual inscriptions. Yet Spanish chronicles describe Quipucamayoc's official knot keepers who could read them aloud like scribes reciting scripture. Some scholars believe the chords served as mnemonic devices, triggering memorized oral traditions rather than storing standalone text. Others point to their structural similarities to DNA coding or computer binaries, proposing they represent an entirely unique form of information storage. One tantalizing clue comes from remote Peruvian villages, where elders still use simplified quipus to record livestock births and communal labor, living fragments of a system once capable of governing 10 million people. Why did this innovation remain confined to the Andes? The answer lies in the quipu's fatal strength. It required specialized human interpreters. When the Spanish executed Quipucamayocs and burned their chords as pagan artifacts, they didn't just destroy records. They severed the neural link between knots and meaning. Today, as linguists apply AI pattern recognition to surviving quipus, each decoded knot whispers the same urgent lesson. Writing isn't always ink on parchment. Sometimes it's a language woven into the very fabric of a culture, as fragile as it is profound. The quipu's legacy challenges our deepest assumptions about communication, that progress must follow a straight line from pictographs to alphabets. Perhaps some forms of knowledge were never meant to be written down, only remembered in the dance of colored strings between skilled fingers. On the choppy waters of the Mediterranean, where wooden fleets decided the fate of empires, Byzantine ships unleashed a terror unlike anything the ancient world had seen, a liquid fire that clung to hulls and flesh, burning even as waves crashed over it. Greek fire, as their enemies came to call it, wasn't just a weapon. It was a psychological masterstroke, a chemical nightmare that turned the sea itself into an ally. Picture Arab sailors in the 7th century, their invasion force reduced to flaming wreckage in minutes, survivors whispering of flames that leaped from ship to ship like a living thing. The secret of its formula was guarded so fiercely that even today, after centuries of analysis, we still don't know exactly how they made it. What made Greek fire so devastating wasn't just its flammability, but its delivery. Byzantine galleys mounted bronze siphons on their prows, pumping the substance through pressurized tubes that could spit fire dozens of feet, a flamethrower centuries before the modern concept existed. Historical accounts describe the liquid igniting on contact with water, suggesting a recipe involving quicklime or naphtha that reacted violently with moisture. Some reports claim it burned underwater, while others tell of thick smoke choking victims before flames ever reached them. The effect was chaos incarnate, enemy crews leaping into the sea only to find the water itself aflame around them. The true brilliance lay in its strategic deployment. Byzantine admirals used Greek fire sparingly, often at night, to magnify its terrifying spectacle. During the siege of Constantinople in 678, it single-handedly repelled an Arab fleet, saving the empire from collapse. Later, it shattered Russian invasions on the Black Sea, it's mere rumor enough to make seasoned warriors hesitate. This wasn't just chemistry, it was theater. The Byzantines understood that a weapon's power lies as much in perception as in destruction. By keeping its formula a state secret, punishable by death if leaked, they cultivated an aura of invincibility. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how Greek fire worked, but why its recipe vanished. Some speculate it required ingredients from distant corners of the empire, crude oil from the Caucasus, pine resin from Anatolia, that became inaccessible as Byzantine territory shrank. Others believe the knowledge was so tightly held that when Constantinople finally fell in 1453, the last few who understood it took the secret to their graves. Modern attempts to recreate it have produced similar incendiary mixtures, but none match the historical descriptions of a substance that seemed almost supernatural in its persistence. The legacy of Greek fire echoes in today's warfare, where fear remains as potent a weapon as firepower, but its deeper lesson is about the fragility of knowledge. Here was a technology so advanced, so carefully guarded, that its creators assumed it would last forever, only to discover that empires fall faster than flames die. The sea that once burned with Byzantine ingenuity now keeps its secrets, leaving us to wonder how many other marvels vanished when the wrong gate fell, the wrong library burned, the last keeper of an art died without passing it on. Deep in the steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, where the Maya built towering pyramids to the gods, another marvel was taking shape, not in stone but in something far more unexpected. Rubber, not the stiff, brittle material Europeans knew from dried tree sap, but a bouncy, elastic substance that could withstand the pounding of ritual ball games. Centuries before Charles Goodyear patented vulcanization in the 1800s, Maya chemists had already cracked the code, transforming raw latex into durable, resilient material through a process we're only now beginning to understand. The secret lay in a deceptively simple formula. By mixing latex from local rubber trees with juice from morning glory vines, Maya artisans triggered a chemical reaction that stabilized the rubber, preventing it from melting in the tropical heat or cracking in the cool of night. Modern experiments recreating their methods reveal something astonishing. This combination creates sulfur-like bridges between latex molecules, an accidental precursor to vulcanization, achieved over 1,000 years earlier. The result, rubber balls so lively they could reach heights of 20 feet when dropped, used in games that were far more than sport. These contests reenacted cosmic battles between gods, with stakes so high that some scholars believe the losing team's captain might have been sacrificed. But rubber's uses didn't stop at recreation. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of waterproof textiles, sandals with flexible soles, and even rudimentary rubber syringes tools that suggest medical applications we're only beginning to piece together. One particularly striking find is a collection of rubber-coated figurines, their surfaces still elastic after centuries buried in humid soil. The implications are staggering. While Europe was still wrapping feet in leather strips, Maya craftsmen were producing footwear with shock absorption worthy of modern sneakers. What's often overlooked is how this innovation reflects a deep understanding of local ecology. The Maya didn't just stumble upon rubber, they cultivated entire groves of rubber trees, managing them like orchards. Morning glory vines, far from being weeds, were deliberately planted alongside them, their chemical properties carefully harnessed. This wasn't just chemistry. It was a symbiotic relationship between people and plants, a dialogue of knowledge passed down through generations. Yet for all its brilliance, Maya rubber technology remained confined to Mesoamerica. When Spanish conquistadors encountered bouncing rubber balls, they dismissed them as pagan curiosities, failing to grasp their scientific significance. The recipes, like so much indigenous knowledge, were nearly lost to time. Today, as materials scientists study ancient rubber samples for biodegradable alternatives to synthetic polymers, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable truth that some of the most sustainable solutions might not lie in futuristic labs, but in the forgotten wisdom of civilizations who learned to work with nature rather than against it. The Maya didn't just invent rubber, they mastered it, leaving behind a legacy that still bounces back into our lives if we're willing to catch it. Off the coast of ancient Carthage, where Mediterranean waves lapped against stone quays, a simple but devastating innovation lurked beneath the water's surface. A gargantuan chain, thick as a man's thigh, stretched across the harbor mouth like an invisible barricade. At a moment's notice, this submerged monster could be winched taut from hidden towers, transforming an open channel into an impassable wall of iron. Imagine enemy warships charging what they thought was an undefended port, only to hear the sickening crunch of hulls meeting unyielding metal. This wasn't just a barrier, it was psychological warfare, a statement that Carthage's navy couldn't be touched. What made the harbor boom revolutionary wasn't its brute strength, but its adaptability. Unlike static defenses like seawalls, the chain could be lowered to let friendly ships pass, then raised in minutes to trap invaders inside or lock them out. Historical accounts describe how Carthaginian engineers paired it with floating fire rafts that could be unleashed against immobilized attackers, a 1-2 punch of immobilization and annihilation. The system's genius lay in its simplicity. Wooden capstans on shore, operated by teams of oxen or slaves, could reel in the massive links with terrifying speed. Modern experiments suggest a well-maintained chain could snap a trireme's oars like twigs or punch holes through lighter hulls. The ripple effects of this invention reshaped naval strategy across the ancient world. After witnessing its effectiveness during the Punic Wars, Rome adopted similar harbor defenses for Ostia and later Constantinople, where the famous chain across the Golden Horn held off invaders for centuries. But the Carthaginians took it further. Their circular military harbor at Carthage featured an inner ring where ships could be hidden behind multiple boom layers, a precursor to modern naval bases with sequential security zones. Archaeologists studying the site have found evidence the chains weren't just iron, but bronze reinforced at stress points, showing an understanding of metallurgy far ahead of its time. Yet the harbor boom's true legacy might be how it forced innovation in siege tactics. When Scipio Africanus finally breached Carthage's defenses in 146 BC, his troops used grappling hooks to literally climb the chain under cover of darkness, an early example of special operations overcoming technological superiority. Later medieval port cities from Venice to Hong Kong would employ variations of the boom, proving that sometimes the most enduring inventions aren't flashy gadgets, but elegant solutions to timeless problems. The next time you see a modern harbor's floating barriers or anti-submarine nets, remember, their ancestor was forged in the fires of Carthage's desperation, a reminder that the best defense isn't always stronger walls but smarter ones. In the bustling marketplaces of Mohenjo-Daro, where merchants from Mesopotamia to the Himalayas bartered goods, the true marvel wasn't what they traded, but how. Nestled among terracotta pots and lapis lazuli beads lay small, carefully crafted cubes of chert and agate, each one identical in weight to its counterparts across the Indus Valley. These weren't just stones, they were the foundation of history's first globalized economy, a system of standardized weights so precise it would make modern inspectors blush. Picture a merchant from distant Oman pouring gold dust onto a bronze scale, watching as the balance tipped against a Harappan weight carved with geometric perfection, confidence in every grain that this measure would hold true from the shores of the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas. What made this system revolutionary wasn't just its accuracy, but its universality. archaeologists have unearthed these weights from dozens of Harappan sites, spanning an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. The smallest unit, a tiny sphere weighing around 0.87 grams, was part of a decimal-based system where each subsequent weight multiplied by factors of 2, 4, 8, and 16, a binary-like progression that hints at mathematical sophistication we rarely attribute to Bronze Age minds. Even more astonishing, these standards held firm for nearly 700 years, with deviations rarely exceeding 1%. That's tighter tolerance than some modern manufacturing processes. But the real mystery lies in how they maintained such consistency without centralized oversight. Unlike Egyptian grain measures tied to pharaonic decrees or Mesopotamian standards enforced by temple priests, Harappan weights show no royal seals or religious motifs. Scholars now believe their system emerged from the bottom up, a rare example of organic standardization, where traders across vast distances voluntarily adopted common measures because it simply made life easier. Though weights themselves tell this story, many show smooth grooves from years of use, their edges worn by countless hands, yet their mass unchanged. This was trust made tangible. So why did this economic miracle vanish? The answer may lie in the very thing that made it successful: its decentralization. When climate shifts disrupted trade routes and cities dwindled, there were no imperial enforcers to preserve the standards. Later cultures like the Vedic peoples used variable weight systems tied to barley grains, a step backward in precision. By the time Alexander's armies reached the Indus, the memory of those perfect chert cubes had faded into legend. Today, as digital algorithms govern global trade, the Harappan weights whisper a provocative truth. The most resilient systems aren't always those imposed by kings or coded in law. Sometimes they're the ones that emerge quietly from collective need, woven not by force, but by countless individual choices to measure the world the same way. In an era obsessed with blockchain and traceability, these 4,000-year-old stones remind us that standardization isn't about control, it's about connection. Along the rugged coastlines of Australia, where the Pacific meets ancient stone, lie some of humanity's most enduring yet overlooked inventions, the Aboriginal fish traps. These intricate labyrinths of rock walls, some stretching hundreds of feet across tidal flats, aren't just relics. They're a masterclass in sustainable harvesting, designed to work with the ocean's rhythms rather than against them. Picture the tide rolling in, carrying fish over the low stone barriers, only to leave them stranded in shallow pools as the water recedes, a harvest timed to the moon's pull, requiring no nets, no hooks, just an intimate understanding of nature's clockwork. What makes these traps extraordinary isn't their complexity, but their longevity. Dating back at least 6,000 years, older than the pyramids of Egypt, they were maintained across generations through communal effort, their stones patiently repositioned after storms or shifting sands. Unlike modern fishing methods that deplete stocks, these systems were self-regulating. Smaller fish could escape through gaps, ensuring only mature specimens were collected. The traps weren't just tools, they were expressions of a philosophy that viewed abundance as something to steward, not exploit. Communities using them developed intricate lunar calendars to predict optimal trapping times, blending astronomy with ecology in ways Western science would only rediscover millennia later. Yet for all their sophistication, these structures remained invisible to European settlers for centuries. Some were mistaken for natural rock formations, others dismantled to build harbors or roads. The irony is staggering. While colonists struggled to farm unfamiliar land, the very solutions to sustainable food production lay beneath their boats, woven into the landscape by the world's oldest continuous culture. Modern archaeologists using aerial photography have since mapped thousands of these traps, revealing networks that once fed entire nations. Along the Barwon River in New South Wales, one complex spans nearly a square mile, a scale that rivals any ancient agricultural project. The real question isn't how they worked, but why their wisdom faded from global awareness. Part of the answer lies in the quiet subtlety of indigenous knowledge, systems passed down through demonstration and story rather than written manuals. But there's a deeper lesson here about what we value as innovation. We celebrate towering monuments and gleaming machines, often overlooking technologies that leave no waste, need no fuel, and harmonize with their environment. Today, as marine biologists study these traps for insights into low-impact fishing, their legacy challenges the myth that progress always means newer, faster, stronger. Sometimes the most advanced solutions are the ones that endure by doing less, not more, whispering across millennia that sustainability isn't a modern discovery, but a rediscovery. Among the treasures unearthed from Nimrod's royal palaces, one artifact stands out not for its gold or jewels, but for its eerie modernity: a polished rock crystal disc, slightly oval, with one flat side and one gently convex. At first glance, it could pass for a magnifying glass from any modern desk. But this lens dates back to the 8th century BCE, a product of Assyrian craftsmen who ruled Mesopotamia when Rome was just a cluster of huts. The Nimrod lens, as it's now known, isn't just a curiosity, it's a puzzle that challenges our assumptions about ancient technology. What makes this lens remarkable isn't just its existence, but its precision. Measuring roughly 4 centimeters across, its curvature suggests it could magnify objects up to 3 times their size, enough to thread a needle or scrutinize tiny cuneiform inscriptions. Some scholars go further, proposing it might have been part of a composite telescope, allowing Assyrian astronomers to track celestial movements with startling accuracy. This isn't pure speculation. Assyrian records boast of celestial observations so precise they could predict lunar eclipses to within minutes. Could a tool like this have been their secret? The implications ripple outward. If the lens was indeed used for astronomy, it would predate the earliest known telescopes by over 2 millennia. This might explain how Assyrian star charts achieved such detail, or why their zodiac divisions align so closely with modern calculations. But here's the twist: the lens was found not in an observatory, but among glassware in a royal storeroom. Some argue it was merely a decorative inlay or a fire-starting tool. Yet its optical properties are undeniable. Modern optometrists who have examined it confirm its focal length is no accident. The curvature is too deliberate, the polish too exact. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the lens's imperfections. Tiny bubbles trapped in the crystal scatter light in ways that create a rudimentary anti-glare effect, a flaw that, ironically, would have sharpened its use under the harsh Mesopotamian sun. This suggests something profound. The Assyrians weren't just lucky to stumble upon magnification. They understood it. They might not have known the physics of light refraction, but through trial and error, they'd mastered a tool that harnessed it. Why then did this technology vanish? The answer may lie in its fragility. Rock crystal lenses are brittle, prone to shattering or scratching with use. Without a tradition of glassmaking to refine the technique, each lens would have been a rare masterpiece, vulnerable to the chaos of wars and palace fires. Later civilizations, from Greece to Persia, would reinvent magnifying tools independently, unaware their ancestors had already unlocked the secret. Today, as we peer through high-powered telescopes at distant galaxies, the Nimrod lens offers a humbling reminder. Innovation isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a fleeting spark, a glimpse of what could have been, buried in the sands until we're ready to see it clearly again. Scattered across the vast Pacific, where the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction, Polynesian navigators embarked on voyages spanning thousands of miles without compasses, without sextants, without even a written language to record their secrets. Their most ingenious tool, deceptively simple grids of sticks lashed together, dotted with shells that shimmered like stars. These weren't crude attempts at map-making. They were four-dimensional models of the ocean itself, encoding wave patterns, currents, and the subtle dance of swells bouncing off distant islands. Picture a navigator crouched in his canoe, fingers tracing the intersections of these sticks, feeling the ocean's pulse through wood and memory alone. What made these stick charts revolutionary wasn't their materials, but their abstraction. Unlike European maps obsessed with fixed coordinates, Polynesian charts represented fluid dynamics, how waves refract around landmasses, how currents shift with seasons, even how specific islands distorted the swell patterns like fingerprints. Shells marked atolls too low to see until you were almost upon them, while curved sticks mimicked how waves bent around undiscovered shores. Modern oceanographers studying these charts made a startling discovery. They accurately model phenomena like the wave shadow effect, where islands disrupt swells in predictable ways. This wasn't just wayfinding, it was hydrodynamics mastered centuries before the science had a name. The real magic lay in how knowledge was transmitted. Each chart was unique to its creator, useless without the oral traditions that gave it meaning. Navigators memorized charts listing star paths, bird migrations, and the color changes in deep ocean water, a living database passed down through generations. When Captain Cook marveled at Tahitian navigators pinpointing islands, with no instruments but their own senses, he was witnessing the culmination of millennia of observation compressed into mental algorithms. Today, Hawaiian navigators like Nainoa Thompson still use these techniques, proving their accuracy by sailing replicas of ancient double-hulled canoes from Hawaii to Tahiti and back using only stars and swells as guides. Why did this system remain isolated to the Pacific? The answer lies in its very perfection. Polynesian navigation was so finely tuned to their environment that it resisted translation. European sailors, dependent on tools and charts, couldn't grasp a system rooted in bodily awareness and ecological intimacy. When metal compasses arrived, the stick charts faded, not because they were inferior, but because their wisdom was too bound to the hands that made them. Now, as modern sailors rediscover wave piloting to reduce reliance on GPS, the stick charts whisper a timeless truth. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a device but a way of seeing. The ocean they mapped wasn't just water. It was a living, breathing entity, its rhythms decoded not in ink, but in the language of wood and memory. Across the windswept steppes of Central Asia, where temperatures could swing from scorching heat to bone-chilling cold in a single day, the Scythian nomads crafted a material so adaptable it became their second skin felt. Not the flimsy craft store variety we know today, but a dense, nearly indestructible fabric woven from matted wool fibers through a process that part chemistry, part brute force. Picture warriors stomping on soaked sheep's wool for hours, their rhythmic movements binding the fibers into a seamless, waterproof shield against the elements. This wasn't just textile work, it was survival engineering, born from an intimate understanding of animal fibers and the merciless climate they called home. What set Scythian felt apart was its unparalleled versatility. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments from burial mounds that reveal layers treated with animal fats or plant resins, creating a breathable yet impermeable barrier against rain and snow. Some pieces were deliberately felted to different thicknesses, thinner for flexible boot liners, thicker for yurt walls that insulated against -40-degree winters. The real genius lay in its portability. Unlike woven fabrics that unraveled under stress, felt could be rolled, folded, or even cut and refused with hot water and pressure, a nomadic tailor's dream. When Herodotus described the Scythians as clothed in storms, he might have been marveling at how their felt garments shed wind and moisture like a second hide. But perhaps the most ingenious application was in their famous yurts. Felt panels lashed over lattice frames created dwellings that were lightweight yet sturdy, warm in winter yet ventilated in summer. Modern tests recreating these structures show something astonishing. A double-layered felt yurt can maintain a 20-degree temperature difference between inside and out without a single modern insulating material. The Scythians didn't just make tents, they built climate-controlled mobile homes, their walls often decorated with elaborate applique designs that turned functional material into cultural canvas. Why did this wonder material fade from wider use? The answer lies in the Scythians' own success. As settled civilizations adopted felt, they industrialized its production, sacrificing quality for quantity. Roman workshops churned out thinner, less durable versions for hats and cloaks, while medieval Europeans prized woven fabrics for their status symbolism. Only in the harshest environments, Mongolia, Tibet, the Himalayas, did traditional felt making survive intact. Today, as material scientists study ancient Scythian samples for biodegradable alternatives to synthetic insulation, we're rediscovering what nomadic cultures knew all along. Sometimes the most advanced solutions don't come from labs, but from listening to the land and the animals that sustain us. The steps may be silent now, but their lessons in resilience are written in every surviving scrap of that ancient felt, a fabric that didn't just clothe warriors but shaped an entire way of life. Deep in the sweltering jungles of Veracruz, where the Olmec civilization carved colossal stone heads from basalt, archaeologists uncovered small, polished artifacts that defied explanation. Mysterious bars of magnetite, carefully shaped and smoothed, their surfaces gleaming like dark mirrors. At first glance, they might have been jewelry or ceremonial objects, but when researchers held them aloft, something extraordinary happened. The bars consistently aligned themselves along a north-south axis, pulled by forces invisible to the naked eye. These weren't just decorative trinkets, they were compasses crafted centuries before the earliest known Chinese magnetic compasses appeared in the historical record. What makes these artifacts so fascinating isn't just their existence, but the questions they raise about how the Olmecs understood them. Unlike later cultures that harnessed magnetism for navigation, the Olmecs left no written records explaining their use. Some scholars argue these magnetite bars were ritual objects, imbued with spiritual significance, perhaps tools for divination, aligning temples with cosmic forces, or guiding the dead to the afterlife. Others point to their geometric precision, suggesting they may have been surveying instruments used to orient the sprawling ceremonial centers that defined Olmec urban planning. The truth might lie somewhere in between. Imagine a priest-astronomer holding one of these bars during a solstice ceremony, watching as it subtly shifted to mirror the unseen currents of the earth itself, a physical manifestation of the sacred. The real mystery lies in how the Olmecs discovered magnetism at all. Magnetite isn't native to their lowland heartland. It had to be imported from distant highland sources, meaning these artifacts were valuable enough to transport across treacherous terrain. Did traders notice its strange properties when it interfered with metal tools? Or was its pull first observed in naturally magnetized lodestones, revered for their seemingly magical behavior? Modern experiments recreating the bars show they're not just randomly magnetized, their poles were deliberately aligned during shaping, proving the Olmecs didn't just stumble upon this phenomenon. They mastered it, yet for all their sophistication, the Olmec compasses vanished from the archaeological record as suddenly as they appeared. Later Mesoamerican cultures like the Maya and Aztecs used magnetite for mirrors and adornments, but there's no evidence they retained its navigational or ritual applications. Some speculate the knowledge was guarded by a small elite, lost when Olmec society declined. Others believe later civilizations simply prioritized different technologies, leaving these magnetic marvels to gather dust in the jungle. Today, as scientists study Olmec sites with magnetometers, they're uncovering tantalizing clues, subtle magnetic anomalies in temple floors, suggesting the compasses might have been part of a larger system for aligning sacred architecture with celestial events. The lesson here isn't just about who discovered magnetism first. It's about how cultures perceive the invisible forces around them, whether as tools to be wielded, mysteries to be revered, or both. The Olmec compasses whisper a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Sometimes the most profound innovations aren't just about what they do, but how they change the way we see the world. In the rugged highlands of Anatolia, where the Hittite Empire forged its dominance, a revolution was brewing, not in politics or warfare, but in the very fires of their furnaces. While most of the Bronze Age world prized copper and tin, the Hittites unlocked something far more formidable: iron. Not the brittle, inconsistent metal others had occasionally stumbled upon, but a refined, weapon-grade material strong enough to shatter bronze blades with a single strike. Their secret wasn't just in finding iron, it was in mastering the alchemy of heat and airflow to smelt it at temperatures that would have made other civilizations' furnaces crumble. The breakthrough lay in their bellows. Hittite metallurgists designed furnaces with multiple clay pipes feeding air into the fire, creating a forced draft that pushed temperatures beyond 1,200 degrees Celsius, hot enough to liquefy iron ore and separate pure metal from slag. This wasn't just hotter than Bronze Age smelting. It was a leap into an entirely new realm of material science. Modern experiments recreating their techniques reveal something astonishing. Their furnaces could achieve near-consistent carbon content in the finished iron, a precursor to steel that gave their weapons a terrifying edge. Imagine the shock of Egyptian charioteers at the Battle of Kadesh, their bronze swords notching and bending against Hittite blades that seemed almost unbreakable. But the true genius of Hittite iron wasn't just its hardness, it was its scalability. Unlike bronze, which required scarce tin traded over vast distances, iron ore was abundant across Anatolia. This turned a technological advantage into an economic one, allowing the Hittites to arm entire armies with superior weapons, while their rivals struggled to equip even elites with bronze. Their iron didn't just win battles, it reshaped geopolitics, making the Hittite Empire a superpower feared from Mesopotamia to the Aegean. Yet for all its brilliance, this innovation nearly vanished overnight. When the Hittite capital of Hattusa fell around 1200 BCE, possibly to invading sea peoples or internal revolt, the secrets of their iron smelting scattered with fleeing artisans. Some likely carried their knowledge to new lands. Archaeologists have found hints of Hittite-style furnaces as far away as the Caucasus, but without the centralized workshops and royal oversight that perfected the process, ironworking regressed for centuries. It wasn't until the rise of the Assyrians that high-quality iron re-emerged, and even then, it took generations to match the Hittites' consistency. The legacy of Hittite iron smelting isn't just in the weapons it created, but in the paradigm it shattered. Before them, metallurgy was about embellishment: gold for pharaohs, silver for temples. The Hittites proved metal could be democratized, that abundance could trump rarity. Today, as we drive over steel bridges and type on aluminum laptops, we're living in a world the Hittites helped envision, one where the strength of a civilization isn't measured by the preciousness of its materials, but by its ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Carved deep into Malta's golden limestone, a network of parallel grooves stretches across the island like ghostly train tracks frozen in stone. These are the cart ruts' mysterious channels worn into bedrock so precisely aligned, they seem to vanish into the horizon. Some run straight as arrows for hundreds of feet, while others curve and intersect in elaborate junctions that hint at a bustling prehistoric transit system. But here's the puzzle. These grooves date back over 4,000 years, to a time when conventional history claims wheeled transport was barely in its infancy. So what colossal weight were the ancient Maltese moving with such relentless repetition that it left permanent scars on the landscape? The most striking feature of these ruts is their uniformity. Measuring roughly 5 to 6 inches deep and spaced consistently at 4.5 feet apart, they mirror the wheelbase of later Roman chariots yet predate them by millennia. Where patterns suggest they weren't carved deliberately, but ground into existence by countless journeys of heavy sleds or carts laden with cargo, archaeologists studying the grooves found something even more intriguing. At certain points, the ruts dive straight off cliffs or plunge underwater, indicating sea levels were drastically lower when these paths were in use. This wasn't just local transport, it was an industrial-scale operation, possibly ferrying megalithic blocks for Malta's famed temples or hauling agricultural yields from inland farms to coastal traders. But the real enigma lies in the logistics. The deepest ruts cluster near ancient quarries, where slabs of Globigerina limestone were extracted for construction. Modern experiments with replica sledges revealed how these grooves might have formed. Teams of oxen or laborers dragging sleds loaded with multi-ton stones would have followed the same paths repeatedly to avoid getting bogged down in untracked terrain. Over generations, the combination of weight, friction, and Malta's soft bedrock created these indelible highways. Some ruts even show evidence of repair, fresh chiseling to smooth out worn sections, proving they were maintained like modern roads. Yet the cart ruts raise as many questions as they answer. Why do some sets run parallel for miles before suddenly merging, like prehistoric highway lanes? What cargo justified such an expansive network on an island just 17 miles long? One radical theory suggests they weren't for carts at all, but part of an irrigation system channeling seasonal floods, though the precision of their spacing contradicts this. Others propose they guided ritual processions, their paths aligning with celestial events. The most compelling clue might lie in Malta's sister island, Gozo, where similar ruts lead directly to the Jiwith, above Gantija temples, hinting at a sacred industrial complex moving both stone and faith. What's certain is that this system vanished abruptly. As sea levels rose around 3,000 years ago, flooding coastal routes and disrupting trade, the ruts fell into disuse. Later civilizations, from Phoenicians to Romans, either ignored them or repurposed the grooves as property boundaries or defensive trenches. Today, they remain Malta's silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of engineering, one where progress wasn't measured in speed, but in the patient grinding of stone against stone, each groove a testament to the weight of human ambition. High in the misty highlands of Tanzania, where the Great Rift Valley carves its path through ancient rock, stands a cluster of clay towers that rewrite the history of metallurgy. These aren't remnants of some colonial outpost, they're the last traces of Africa's forgotten steel revolution, a network of blast furnaces that produced high-carbon steel as early as 2,000 years ago. Picture villagers feeding iron ore and charcoal into these towering kilns. their designs so efficient they reached temperatures hot enough to liquefy steel centuries before European foundries matched their brilliance. The steel they made wasn't just functional, it was exceptional. Modern metallurgists analyzing fragments have found carbon contents between 0.4 and 0.6%, the sweet spot for combining hardness with flexibility. This wasn't luck, it was precision engineering hidden in plain sight. What set these furnaces apart was their ingenious airflow system. Unlike European bloomeries that required constant bellows pumping, Tanzanian designs used natural wind patterns drawn through strategically placed vents, creating a self-sustaining combustion that burned hotter and cleaner. The furnaces stood up to 16 feet tall, their interior chambers lined with special clay that withstood temperatures approaching 1500 degrees Celsius. But the real marvel was in the chemistry. Workers apparently added calcium-rich minerals to the mix, which acted as flux to remove impurities. This technique wouldn't appear in European metallurgy until the Industrial Revolution. The resulting steel wasn't just hammered into tools and weapons. Archaeologists have found delicate surgical needles and fine jewelry proving this was a versatile material shaping all aspects of life. So why does this revolutionary technology remain virtually unknown outside academic circles? The answer lies in the very environment that nurtured it. Unlike the centralized metalworking hubs of Europe and Asia, these African furnaces were community projects, their knowledge passed orally through generations of blacksmith families rather than written in manuals. When trade routes shifted and populations moved, the techniques stayed local, brilliant but isolated. There's also the uncomfortable truth of historical bias. For centuries, Western scholars assumed advanced metallurgy couldn't have originated in sub-Saharan Africa, attributing any sophisticated artifacts to foreign influence. Only in the 1960s did carbon dating prove these furnaces predated Arab and European contact by generations. The legacy of Tanzania's steel whispers a provocative truth: that innovation isn't about who shouts loudest, but who solves problems where they stand. While European knights clashed with brittle iron swords, African farmers wielded steel hoes that lasted lifetimes. Perhaps real progress isn't measured in empires built, but in everyday tools that endure. These silent clay towers stand not as ruins, but as monuments to a different path technology could have taken, one where sustainability and community mattered more than conquest. Beneath the dense forests bordering Lake Superior, where waves lap against rocky shores, lie the remnants of a technological revolution that predates Egypt's pyramids by millennia. Here, long before European contact, Native American artisans were extracting gleaming copper from bedrock and transforming it into tools of astonishing purity, not by smelting with fire, but through a technique that still baffles metallurgists today: cold hammering. Picture a craftsperson 7,000 years ago, patiently pounding a raw copper nugget with stone hammers, slowly coaxing it into razor-sharp spear points, fishhooks, and awls without ever heating it to melting temperatures. This wasn't just primitive metalworking, it was a lost art of material science, achieving results modern engineers struggle to replicate. The sheer scale of this industry defies expectations. Over 10,000 ancient copper pits scar the landscape around Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, some descending 30 feet into the earth. These weren't haphazard dig sites, but carefully engineered mines with timber supports and drainage channels, evidence of systematic extraction lasting generations. What's truly staggering is the purity of the artifacts they produced. Unlike later cultures that alloyed copper with tin to make bronze, these artisans worked with 99.9% pure metal, a feat requiring access to rare native copper deposits and an intimate understanding of its properties. Modern attempts to recreate their cold-hammered tools reveal something astonishing. the repeated pounding actually rearranged the copper's crystalline structure, making it harder than many bronze implements of the same era. But the real mystery lies in how they achieved such precision without annealing the process of heating and cooling metal to prevent brittleness. Normally, cold-worked copper becomes stiff and prone to cracking after prolonged hammering. Yet these ancient tools show no such weakness. Some theories suggest they may have used alternating cycles of hammering and resting to allow the metal to heal naturally, or perhaps exploited unique properties of Lake Superior's native copper, which contains trace silver that enhances malleability. The most compelling clue comes from ceremonial artifacts found at burial sites, elaborate headdresses and breastplates so thin and uniform they resemble machine-stamped foil. These weren't just functional items, they were masterpieces of metallurgical art, their existence proving these artisans had turned intuition into a repeatable science. Why did this tradition fade? The answer may lie in its very success. Unlike bronze, which could be cast into molds for mass production, cold-hammered copper required immense time and skill per object. When European trade introduced iron tools, the labor-intensive methods couldn't compete. But the deeper loss was the knowledge itself, the nuanced understanding of how copper moves under a stone hammer, how to read stress patterns in the metal, when to pause and when to strike. Today, as materials scientists study these artifacts for insights into sustainable metalworking, they're confronting an uncomfortable truth. Some ancient innovations can't be reverse engineered through technology alone. They required something we'll never fully recover: generations of hands-on wisdom, passed from teacher to apprentice in a language of touch and rhythm now silenced by time. The copper tools of the Great Lakes aren't just relics. They're echoes of a different relationship with materials, one where mastery meant listening to the metal as much as shaping it. Beneath the scorching Mesopotamian sun, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved their paths through fertile soil, an accidental discovery in the ashes of a campfire sparked a revolution in human craftsmanship. Around 3500 BC, as potters stoked their kilns with natron, a salt harvested from dried lake beds, they noticed something extraordinary. The intense heat fused the natron with sand to create a translucent, jewel-like substance that hardened as it cooled. This wasn't just a curiosity, it was the birth of glassmaking, an innovation that would transform art, trade, and daily life across the ancient world. Those early artisans quickly realized they'd stumbled upon something miraculous. Unlike stone or clay, this new material could mimic the brilliance of lapis lazuli and turquoise at a fraction of the cost. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny glass beads from this era, their surfaces still gleaming with cobalt blues and emerald greens after 5 millennia buried in the earth. But the real breakthrough came when Mesopotamian craftsmen discovered they could manipulate molten glass like taffy, winding it around clay cores to form hollow vessels, or pressing it into molds to create intricate amulets. The oldest surviving glass bottle, found in northern Iraq, shows a sophistication that belies its age. Its walls are paper-thin, its shape perfectly symmetrical, proof that these artisans weren't just dabbling. They'd mastered an entirely new medium. What made Mesopotamian glass so revolutionary was its chemistry. By experimenting with metal oxides, they unlocked a rainbow of colors: cobalt for deep blues, copper for vibrant greens, manganese for purples, each batch a testament to their growing understanding of material science. Some of their recipes remain mysteries even today. The famous Mesopotamian red glass, for instance, achieved its ruby hue through a precise combination of gold nanoparticles and copper, a technique modern scientists only decoded in the 21st century using electron microscopes. This wasn't trial and error. It was systematic innovation passed down through generations of craftsmen who guarded their formulas like state secrets. The ripple effects of this technology spread far beyond jewelry. Glass vessels revolutionized medicine by allowing liquids to be stored without contamination, while magnifying lenses made from polished glass fragments may have aided scribes in etching cuneiform onto tiny clay tablets. Perhaps most importantly, Mesopotamian glassmakers established the very concept of synthetic gems, proving that humans could rival nature's beauty through chemistry and fire. Their knowledge traveled along trade routes to Egypt, where it fueled an entire industry of funerary artifacts, and eventually to the Roman Empire, where glassblowing would reach new heights. Yet for all its brilliance, early glassmaking nearly vanished during the Bronze Age collapse. As empires crumbled and trade networks dissolved, the delicate chain of knowledge transmission broke. It would take centuries for Phoenician and later Venetian glassmakers to rediscover what Mesopotamians had perfected. Today, as we sip from crystal-clear drinking glasses or peer through telescope lenses at distant galaxies, we're participating in a tradition that began with those ancient artisans watching fire transform sand into something magical. Their legacy reminds us that some of humanity's most enduring innovations aren't just about utility. They're about our eternal desire to capture light itself and hold it in our hands. High in the Andes, where steep slopes defy conventional farming, the Inca engineered a solution so effective it turned vertical cliffs into bread baskets. Their terraced fields, carved like giant staircases into mountainsides, weren't just feats of landscaping, they were a masterclass in ecological harmony. Picture this: each stone-walled terrace acts as a microclimate, trapping warmth from the sun during frigid nights while preventing precious topsoil from washing away during torrential rains. The genius lies in the details. Inca builders layered gravel beneath the soil for drainage, positioned walls to absorb daytime heat, and even engineered underground channels that redirected meltwater to nourish crops at every elevation. This wasn't just farming, it was a dialogue with the land, a system so finely tuned that modern agronomists still study it for sustainable practices. What's astonishing isn't just the scale. Some terrace systems stretch over thousands of feet in elevation, but their resilience. Unlike modern monocultures that exhaust soil, these fields grew diverse crops like potatoes, quinoa, and maize in rotating cycles that naturally replenished nutrients. The secret: the Inca viewed the mountain as a living partner. They planted nitrogen-fixing trees along terrace edges, kept bees for pollination, and even cultivated edible weeds between rows to protect against pests. This holistic approach created a closed-loop system where waste didn't exist. Every leaf, stem, and animal byproduct had a purpose. At Moray, a stunning concentric terrace complex, researchers discovered temperature variations of up to 27 degrees between levels, suggesting the Inca may have used these laboratories to test crops across simulated climates. The real marvel is how these terraces endure. While contemporary farms battle erosion and depletion, Inca fields still produce abundant harvests after 5 centuries. Modern farmers in the Andes who have revived these techniques report yields up to 3 times higher than conventional methods, with no synthetic fertilizers. The key lies in the terrace's ability to slow water's descent, allowing it to seep into the ground rather than triggering destructive runoff. During El Niño storms that devastate modern farms, ancient terraces often emerge unscathed, their stone walls dispersing floodwaters with elegant efficiency. Yet this innovation nearly vanished when Spanish conquistadors imposed European farming models, dismissing terraces as primitive. Only in remote communities did the knowledge survive, passed down through generations like the seeds themselves. Today, as climate change threatens global food security, the Inca's legacy offers a radical lesson. Productivity doesn't require dominating nature. Sometimes, the most advanced technology is the one that listens to the slope of the land, the rhythm of the seasons, and the wisdom of those who came before. These terraces aren't relics. They're blueprints for a future where agriculture doesn't just feed people, but heals the earth. Buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, a cracked clay tablet no larger than your palm holds secrets that rewrite the history of mathematics. Known as Plimpton 322, this Babylonian artifact from around 1800 BC doesn't just record numbers. It unveils a trigonometric system so advanced it predates Greek trigonometry by over a millennium. What's astonishing isn't merely its age, but its sophistication. Unlike the Greeks, who approached triangles through angles and circles, the Babylonians worked with ratios, a method eerily similar to modern computational trigonometry. Their tablet lists 15 perfect Pythagorean triples, some so large like 12,709 squared plus 13,500 squared equals 18,541 squared, that scholars argue they must have used an algorithmic approach rather than trial and error. The brilliance of Babylonian math lies in its practicality. These weren't abstract exercises, they were tools for building ziggurats, surveying land, and tracking celestial movements. Their base 60 system, the reason we still divide hours into 60 minutes, allowed for fractions more precise than Egyptian or Roman numerals could achieve. Archaeologists have found tablets showing how they calculated the diagonal of a square unit, deriving a value for the square root of 2 accurate to 6 decimal places. But here's the real shocker. Their trigonometric tables used a concept akin to modern secants, solving problems involving slopes and ramps centuries before Hipparchus, the so-called father of trigonometry, was even born. How did such revolutionary knowledge vanish from mainstream history? Part of the answer lies in the fragility of clay versus Greek parchment, and part in the Babylonians' focus on applied rather than theoretical math. While Greek scholars wrote treatises, Babylonian mathematicians produced working manuals, their brilliance embedded in everyday calculations rather than grand pronouncements. Yet fragments of their system survived. Some scholars believe their base 60 angles influenced Greek astronomy, while their Pythagorean triples reappear in Indian and Islamic mathematics. The irony is profound. The Greeks, often credited with inventing trigonometry, may have been refining a Babylonian framework all along. Today, as mathematicians decode more tablets, a tantalizing question emerges. What other computational shortcuts did they possess that we're still uncovering? Their legacy challenges the very narrative of scientific progress, not as a linear march, but as a tapestry of rediscoveries, where ancient solutions sometimes outshine modern assumptions. The next time you check your watch, remember, those 60 seconds ticking by are a silent tribute to Babylon's forgotten math revolution. Long before the Montgolfier brothers became famous for their balloon flights in 18th century France, the skies above ancient China may have carried a far older secret: the first manned flights in human history. According to records from the Three Kingdoms period, the legendary strategist Zhang crafted ingenious lanterns that could rise into the night, not just as signals, but possibly as vessels for human passengers. These weren't mere paper decorations. They were miniature hot air balloons powered by the same basic principles that would lift European balloons 1,500 years later: heat rising into an enclosed space, creating lift. The design was deceptively simple. A bamboo frame held a wax-soaked cloth or paper canopy with a small fire suspended beneath it. As the air inside heated, the lantern would tug against its tethers, straining upward like a living thing. Historical texts describe these lanterns floating high above battlefields, used to coordinate troop movements or send distress signals across vast distances. But scattered accounts hint at something more daring: stories of scouts or messengers riding larger versions into the sky, their silhouettes vanishing into the clouds. Imagine the awe of soldiers below, watching what they believed to be celestial messengers rather than human pilots. What makes these ancient flights plausible isn't just legend, but physics. Modern engineers have recreated huge Zhang's lanterns using materials available at the time, proving they could theoretically support the weight of a person if scaled up. The key lies in the bamboo's strength-to-weight ratio and the lantern's ability to retain heat, a balance ancient artisans might have perfected through trial and error. Some scholars point to later Qin Dynasty illustrations showing figures suspended beneath floating spheres, though whether these were artistic flourishes or records of actual flights remains hotly debated. The real mystery isn't whether the Chinese invented hot air balloons; they clearly did, but how far they pushed the technology. Unlike later European flights, which were celebrated spectacles, any ancient manned ascents would have been military secrets, their knowledge guarded like state treasure. This secrecy might explain why the technology didn't spread globally. When Mongol armies later encountered these lanterns during invasions, they reportedly mistook them for supernatural omens, not realizing they were witnessing a lost chapter of aviation history. Today, as paper lanterns still float over Asian festivals, their flickering lights carry echoes of a tantalizing possibility: that humanity's dream of flight didn't begin with Da Vinci's sketches or the Wright brothers' biplane, but with a strategist's clever twist on fire and silk, lifting not just light into the darkness, but perhaps people into the sky. The absence of surviving large-scale lanterns doesn't disprove their existence, only reminds us how fragile pioneering technologies can be, especially when their makers valued secrecy over fame. Every lantern released today is more than a tradition; it's a tribute to those who might have been the first to touch the heavens. From forgotten machines to lost sciences, these 30 innovations shatter the myth that ancient civilizations were primitive. They weren't just stumbling toward progress, they were leaping ahead, solving problems with creativity that still leaves us awestruck. The Antikythera Mechanism's celestial calculations, the Nazca subterranean aqueducts, the Hittites' iron forging mastery, each one forces us to rethink what advanced really means. These weren't lucky accidents, they were the products of observation, experimentation, and generations of accumulated wisdom, proving that genius isn't bound by era or technology. What's even more remarkable is how many of these breakthroughs echo in our modern world. That Roman concrete self-healing with rainwater, scientists are now engineering bacteria to mimic its crack-filling magic in modern infrastructure. The Olmec's magnetic compasses, they hint at a lost understanding of natural forces we've only recently quantified. Even the humble Mesopotamian seed drill, forgotten for millennia, revolutionized agriculture all over again when reinvented during the Industrial Revolution. The past isn't just a museum, it's a blueprint full of solutions we're still rediscovering. Yet for every innovation we've unearthed, countless others likely vanished without a trace. Imagine the libraries burned at Alexandria, the workshops crushed by earthquakes, the oral traditions silenced by time. How much more could we have learned? The real tragedy isn't just the loss of technology, it's the severing of human connection. These artifacts are messages from minds not so different from our own, whispering across centuries that curiosity and ingenuity are timeless. So here's the challenge these forgotten marvels leave us with: to look beyond the surface of history. Behind every primitive label might lie sophistication we've yet to recognize. Buried beneath our feet, submerged in ocean depths, or hidden in plain sight in museum storage rooms, who knows what other breakthroughs await rediscovery. The next time you twist open a water bottle or check your GPS, remember, you're standing on the shoulders of inventors whose names we'll never know. Now it's your turn. Which of these ancient innovations surprised you most? Have you encountered traces of forgotten brilliance in your own corner of the world? Drop your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you're hungry for more stories of history's hidden genius, hit that subscribe button. Together, we'll keep pulling back the curtain on the past, one astonishing revelation at a time. After all, history isn't just about where we've been, it's about who we are and who we might